time with the honourable member for Brantford-Brant. This week we learned the story of an Ottawa area senior who said he can no longer afford to heat his home or fuel his car, so he is giving up both. Rick Russell even put up a sign on his house declaring, quote, "Another senior loses his home due to high energy costs," telling reporters he can only afford a home without heat or heat without a home. He's not alone. Disabled grandmother Kathy Katula broke down into tears at the Prime Minister's recent town hall meeting, demanding to know how she would pay his new carbon tax on her home heating when she's already struggling with $1,000 a month electricity bills imposed by the provincial Liberal government in Ontario. The Prime Minister gave her a warm hug, but unfortunately not warm enough to heat her home. These are not isolated cases. The 2016 Ontario Association of Food Banks report entitled "Energy Poverty" said, quote, "Since 2006, hydro rates have increased at a rate of 3.5 times inflation for peak hours and at a rate of 8 times inflation for off-peak hours. 60,000 Ontarians have had their electricity cut off for failing to pay their bills," the report noted, adding that many food bank clients struggle with electricity bills of $300 to $700 a month. The food banks themselves say they are struggling to afford the electricity for their massive refrigerator systems. Ron Dunn, the executive director of Windsor's downtown mission, has had people come to him and plead, quote, "If you can help me with food, then I can pay some of this hydro bill before it gets cut off." These increases are the direct result of the Liberal Green Energy Act, which forces consumers to subsidize millionaire turbine and solar investors who sell overpriced, unneeded, and unreliable electricity to the government. While millionaires have prospered, Ontario has the worst poverty record of any province in Canada since the McGuinty-Wynne Liberals took power. Between 2003 and 2014, the poverty rate dropped by 1/3 in British Columbia, the Prairies, Atlantic Canada, and Quebec. It didn't budge in Ontario. Over the same time period, Ontario had the largest increase in the percentage of the population earning less than half the median income. It also has the worst record for middle-income growth across the country. Ontario's Auditor General calculated that the government subsidies of wind and solar power companies will cost consumers like Kathy and Rick $170 billion, making the Ontario Liberal Green Energy Act likely the single largest wealth transfer from the poor and middle class to the super rich in Canadian history. Now, the national carbon tax will do to gas, groceries, and heating costs exactly what the Green Energy Act has done to electricity. A Statistics Canada official recently testified at the House of Commons Human Resources Committee that increases in fuel, food, and other basic necessities necessarily increase the number of people living below the poverty line. Even carbon tax supporter Nicola Rivers admitted that the tax will raise the prices of gasoline by 11 cents a litre, electricity by another 10%, and natural gas by over 15%. Annually, it will cost $1,028 per person, or $4,100 per family of 4, according to the Canadian Taxpayers Federation. And this month, the Fraser Institute released proof that British Columbia, which has the least damaging carbon tax in the country, will still take a $870 million net tax increase from British Columbian taxpayers. Right. That is to say, the average family of four in British Columbia will pay $728 more in carbon taxes than they get back in offsetting tax relief. And that is the least damaging carbon tax in the country. We know that the burdens of these taxes fall disproportionately on the backs of those with the least for a number of reasons. First, we know that Stats Canada data shows that poor households spend roughly a third more of household income on the basic necessities that will be taxed, like gas, groceries, and heat. While wealthy households still buy these goods, they constitute a much smaller share of a wealthy household's income, and therefore the percentage tax increase is actually higher on those who are poorer, which is the very definition of a regressive tax. Second, the carbon tax will generate billions of dollars in new revenue for the government. Who will get that money? The answer is those who can afford to lobby for grants, rebates, and corporate welfare, under the guise, of course, of saving the environment. I return to the rebate that you can now receive if you can afford to buy a $150,000 Tesla car. So I guess Rick Russell, who's now had to give up his truck, if he wants to get back any of the money he's paying in the carbon tax, he will have to find $150,000 to buy one of these fancy Teslas or Mercedes-Benz electric vehicles, and then he can get $15,000 back. In reality, those wealthy enough to lobby for these rebates will get all the money back, as is so often the case with the theory of trickle-down government. Those at the top end up with the most. So that's why I filed an access to information request to find out how much poor and middle-class taxpayers will pay under the new Liberal carbon tax. And I asked for the government to provide documents such as briefing notes, analyses, projections, and emails regarding the impact of a $50 a ton price on carbon or a carbon tax on the Canadian economy. Please include any analysis on the price of carbon, on the impact on the consumer price index, median incomes, low-income household incomes, the poverty rate, the employment rate, and the unemployment rate. The response was ominous. Quote, imposing a carbon tax will lead to costs that will cascade throughout our economy, said this Finance Department document, referring to two tables that would tell how much households would pay. But those tables are blacked out. These tables would break down the cost of the carbon tax by income quintile for the very poor, the middle class, the upper income, and the rich. Now, the government says it wants to reduce the gap between rich and poor. Shouldn't they then jump at the opportunity to release data on the tax's impact on income inequality? Unless they have something to hide. Could it be, Speaker, that after running an entire election campaign on the supposed promise of taking more from the rich so that they could give back to the poor, that the government is doing precisely the opposite, and worse, trying to cover it up? The most basic principle of parliamentary democracy is that people must consent for the taxes that they pay through the assembled parliament. The Bill of Rights of 1689, which established the parliamentary system that we know today, through the mother parliament in Britain, had as one of its basic principles what would become no taxation without representation. Quote, levying money for or to the use of the Crown without grant of Parliament is illegal. Simply put, government cannot tax what Parliament has not approved, but you cannot approve what you do not know. And therefore, there cannot be taxation without information. This motion calls for the immediate release of that information. Now, these may seem like abstract concepts, but they are real to people like Kathy Katula and Rick Russell and others who have no money to influence government or pull its levers. Two people seeking no program or welfare, merely asking for government to get off their backs and out of their pockets. They pay the bills. They have the right to see those bills. This motion would give them the chance. Anyone voting against it would take that right away from them. Mr. Speaker, I ask the House to vote for this motion to bring the light of day. To pass this motion in the House of Commons is to stand for our duty to represent the common people here in this House of the commoners. Thank you.
Questions and comments? The honourable member for Winnipeg North.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. You know, if there's any policy issue in which the Conservatives can clearly demonstrate that they have lost touch with Canadians, this has got to be it. Even Patrick Brown, the leader of the Progressive Conservative Party in Ontario, has recognized that we need to have a price on carbon. Provincial governments across Canada, with one exception, Mr. Speaker, governments around the world have recognized the price on carbon. Only the Conservative Party of Canada inside the House of Commons has lost touch with reality on this issue. My question to the member is, why does he believe that the Conservative Party is the only party, it seems, in North America that tends to want to say no to a price on carbon? Do they not care about the environment, Mr. Speaker? Why won't they listen to what Canadians have to say on the importance of the environment?
Before the honourable member for Carleton gives his answer, I just want to remind everyone that I'm sure the member for Winnipeg North appreciates the coaching he's getting from the other side, but it's just not the way things work around here. It makes it very difficult for us to hear what the answer is. So I just want to remind everyone to tone it down and wait their turn, and they'll have a chance to speak. The honourable member for Carleton.
Well, even many of the supporters of carbon pricing that the member refers to say that their plan would return to taxpayers in the form of rebates and income tax cuts, everything collected through that price on carbon. The only way to test that proposition is to know what people are paying in the first place. The government has that data. They have tables that demonstrate the cost to each family broken down by income quintile. If they are so confident that Canadians will get back in corresponding tax relief and other measures what they pay in new taxes, then they will release that data. But they won't release it because they know this is a net generator of money for politicians and government that will be disproportionately flowed down to the richest people who are able to purchase the influence in order to get their hands on the money. And they know that that money will come out of the pockets disproportionately of those with the least. This is a wealth transfer, another liberal wealth transfer from the poorest to the richest. And he laughs, but if I'm wrong, release the data and prove me wrong. Exactly.
Questions and comments? The honourable member for Edmonton Strathcona.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker, and I'd like to thank the member for bringing forward this motion. But I have a question for the member from Carleton. Through you, Mr. Speaker, I wonder if he would also entertain, I noticed that requests for documents of the government are rather narrow scope. They're wanting information on what the impacts to Canadian families might be of imposing a carbon tax. But would he also consider amending his call and asking for information on the costing of the failure to take action to address or mitigate climate change and the cost in the delay in that action? Very important that we look at this in a holistic way. I'm sure the member, through Mr. Speaker, is aware that most nations around the world have committed at Paris to take action to reduce. The International Energy Agency has called on this government and all governments to move towards investment in clean energy and reducing greenhouse gases. So I'm wondering if he would give consideration to broadening his request for information from the government also about the other side of the cost of not taking action on addressing climate change.
The honourable member for Carleton.
Well, the premise of the member's question is that the carbon tax is about the environment. Now, the government could try to make the case that it is about the environment if it would release data to show whether the tax is revenue neutral. If, in fact, it is a revenue generator, that is, it brings in more money to government coffers than it returns through corresponding tax relief elsewhere, if it does not do that, then it is merely another tax grab. It has nothing to do with the environment. It's just meant to fund more bloated bureaucracy and more handouts to the wealthy and well-connected. Now, one way to elucidate all members of the House of Commons on that question is to release the data. The government has very detailed tables containing the real cost by income quintile. That is the real cost on the very poor, the middle class, and everyone else. This motion today merely asks them to remove the black ink from those tables and release the data so Canadians know what this tax costs them. I ask for the member's support for that motion.